So yeah, so I'm not really an artist. It's an interesting thing because there's a lot of discussion. Maybe we can talk about that also at the end, but there's a lot of discussion about like science and art together. And I don't know, I feel like also design has a lot to do here in the way that, like I'm a designer, my work is about trying to get, people to use or to understand things. The way I came to science communication is actually through my master degree. So basically, at the end of my master degree, I had 1 year to do a personal project, which is, when you're a student, it's like a big thing. You're like, what am I going to do? Like I
Uh-huh.
want that project to be something interesting. And I started on working on stuff, and I was not convinced at all with what I was doing. And I started sharing with people what I was working on at the time. And it was a bit complex, and I wanted to work with like some complex algorithm and everything. And I was showing that to people, and like random people, regular people, not designer, no one, and the feedback I got was like, wait, what are you talking about? What are those algorithms you're talking about? That was back in 2014 when, before all of the social media, before all
Right.
of that.
Right.
And it really shocked me. Like I was like, wait, maybe before building new things with those tools, maybe we should maybe explain those tools first. And I spent the last 6 months of that year-long project trying to explain algorithms to people through design. And I was like, that's amazing. I can use my skills to explain things to people. And I built a series of games, like interactive games, to explain like Facebook algorithm. It was 2014. To
Right.
explain Google PageRank algorithm, to explain how Siri works, why you can talk to your phone and your phone can reply to you, and all of those things. That was way before AI and generative AI, all of
Oh
that.
yeah, that's really cool.
But yeah, and I was like, okay, how can I use my skills as a designer and create those really cool games? And I had a lot of fun. I had the best grade I could get in my school for that project. So I was like, there's like validation in like doing those things. And I left grad school and I was like, okay, I want to do that. I want to do more of that. It's really that difference of like, it's great to have your article in Nature, but if you have a really nice visualization, maybe you can also get the cover. And that's, like such a cool thing. So
Right.
I think it's where the power of communication design really, really helps here. And honestly, I learned 99% of everything I know right now from that time at the lab with amazing people there, super talented, both researchers and also people who think about like, how do we tell the stories of the research? That's really what I learned there. Okay, I have the tools. I can make some nice graphics. Okay, I can do that. But how do you tell the story? How do you go talk to researcher, spend time with them, try to get them to tell you why that research matters? And then once you understand that, then you can go deep into the paper and start looking about, okay, I understand why it matters. Now let's tell the story behind that research and everything. It's not easy. There is not that much money. It's hard to convince people to put money on science communication in general.
Right.
And it's something that I'm building, but it's pretty cool. I'm working with people right now. I'm working with neuroscientists. I mean, one of the videos. So basically, one of the videos you saw is a series of video we started back in 2022 with neuroscientists at Dartmouth. They're really great people, and they came to see me. They were like, "Oh, we love what you did for MIT. We want the same thing." And I try to sell them something even more ambitious with like those animated videos, and they love it so much. It's very expensive to make, but it's such. I mean, I love those so much. I'm really, really proud of them. You can see like I put some
Yeah,
little
yeah, yeah.
photo in the back. My role here is really as a translator of science and a producer, I would say. My colleague Yanez, who's a good friend of mine, is doing all the animation work. So my work is really about spending time with the researchers, spending time with the research papers, reading everything, writing all the scripts, obviously all of that in very close collaboration with the researchers to make sure that we understand the same thing. I'm asking them that's also I think that's there's really interesting parallel with design because as a designer you're taught in school to be naive to be you have to be the most naive person in the room. You have to be the one
Um,
asking the questions. You're not going to be specialist. You're going to be specialist in design, but you're not going to be specialist in anything. So you have to put yourself in the clothing or in the steps or whatever of the general public. So you have to be the one asking questions. And I love doing that with scientists. We do a lot of back and forth with researchers to make sure the script is like good. And then the next step is maybe the most interesting one is like, how do we go from the story to the metaphors, so like the visual way to represent the stories. And once again, that process is also very much a collaboration with
Right.
myself, with Yanis, my colleague animator, who also has a lot of like, is coming also from like, like movie making and all that. So he has a lot of visual ideas. And also researchers, which also are very, most of the time, super curious about the process and super interested in like, okay, how do we represent things? And honestly, the best feedback I get is we help them understand their own topic. And that's amazing when you think about it, but just spending the time to find the right metaphors, the right visual ways to represent their own research. Sometimes they've been spending like 5 years on that research, but they never looked at the research that way. And they
Yeah.
tell us, oh, wait, we never really thought about it. It's super interesting. It's super cool. It's an amazing feedback to get from them. And then it moves to the, once we all agree on like the metaphors and the way to represent the key ideas, then it moves to the production time. And then there is that whole process also about sound. And we never really, when we started the series, we didn't really thought about that. But when we started producing the first video, we're like, okay, we need the soundtrack, we need a voiceover, we need sound design. And it really came at the end of the process. And now we're trying to put it quite early in the process because those three elements I think are quite interesting in the way of like trying to convey also the research. And we realized that all the visual metaphors, all the time we're spending on visual metaphors, we can also spend a little bit of the time on sound metaphors because those are so powerful and it can also help us reduce the complexity of the animation. You can tell very complex idea just through a few sounds, and our brains are wired in a way like if you hear a certain sound, you're gonna immediately associate that sound with a thought, and you don't have to show it, or you can show a very abstract way of, I mean, a very abstract symbol of that, and the visual simple symbol plus the sound will make us understand things very easily. So now we're really trying to play as much as we can with those to help us understand things. Um, and you
That's
can
super
definitely
interesting. I
see
mean,
that
even
from the
as a
video.
science communicator, mostly dealing with visuals,
Yeah,
like, and text, like I hadn't even thought that there would could
yeah,
be
exactly.
sound
And
metaphors. Like
before
what?
before we started working on this video, I would have never thought about that neither. And now I'm like, we cannot not do it. And at a minimum, it's just a way for us to get people, following the video. So just like little sounds helping the flow. But at sometimes it really reveals some interesting things just with a few sounds. And it's very powerful and it's totally undervalued.
Well, actually, so can you tell me a little bit about the stereotype video? Because a little bit too, and like you're talking about like how to decide what the format is. And I mean, to me, certainly on that particular topic, I mean, you're talking about stereotypes, like how do you represent that without recalling up those stereotypes, right? And so like maybe
Yeah,
having these little icon people that,
exactly.
right, seems a potentially appropriate way to do
Yeah,
that without.
absolutely. Let me open the video on the side so I can also like maybe pinpoint to some specific thing. So yeah, so the first thing is interesting. It's a cultural thing. I'm still a French person, and the way we think about the war stereotypes is a bit different from the way people think about the war stereotype here in the US. And the main researcher on the studies is also a European, is a fellow European, and also is in his ways the way he uses the word stereotypes might be different than the way people use the word or think about the word stereotypes here. So that was the first conversation. Is like we sat down with other researchers from the same consortium from Dartmouth, American researchers, and we had a very open discussion about, okay, how do we represent stereotypes in a way that people will not, I mean, the way people understand culturally what stereotypes are here. And one of the first thing, obviously, is about race and skin color. And when you talk about stereotypes, the first thing that comes in mind to people is like, okay, we're talking about race stereotypes, which is not really what the video is about. In their lab, in their own lab at Dartmouth, there is, and that's going to be not the video we're working on, but the video after that, it is about race. So it's not that we don't want to talk about that. We will talk about that, but that specific piece of research is not about race.
Right.
So like, okay, let's be very conscious about how we represent things to be clear that we're not talking about that. Let me open the video so I can like maybe show you stuff directly. Videos. So that's one thing. The other thing is obviously animation takes a lot of time, and especially if you're trying to be if you're trying to have like complex things. Like I don't know if you, I invite you to check out the other videos, but the very first video we did called Aligning Brains, we tried to have characters that are like human-like, and those are very hard to make because obviously it's hard to draw and it's hard to represent, and you very easily can fall into like visual stereotypes, into like men and women and skin color and all of those things. We're like,
Right.
okay, how can we have humans or characters, let's say, that don't have any of those characteristics, and we're not going to be like identifying them by either the skin color or their physical traits or their hair or if they look
Right.
masculine or feminine or anything like that. So and that's both from yeah, like a mental, psychological point of view, but also from a technical point of view, how do we make them easy to make, you know?
I see. Yeah.
So our animator, Yanes, came up with that idea of like creating those very simple geometrical shape character. He generated this kind of like parametrical like software. He generated like, I don't know, like 100 of them with like different shapes, with triangles, squares, round, circle, whatever, and then you apply different textures to them, so we can still identify them, but without identifying or linking those physical traits to like skin color or
Right.
gender
Right.
or anything like that. So that's the first thing, and then we came up together with the key metaphor, the key visual elements of the video, which is um, basically stereotypes is kind of a filter we put on our eyes when we say things. So how do you represent the idea of a filter before our eyes? And then we were like, okay, we're brainstorming. We came up with like, I don't know, 10 different ways of representing that idea of having a filter. And then we remove a filter when you remove the stereotypes. Um, and in one of the way, and it always comes back to also writing, you know, metaphor is a very textual thing. And one of the way we had to talk about a metaphor is that idea of low resolution. And we're talking about like, yeah, maybe something interesting about that idea of high resolution is like you see the world without the stereotypes because you see all the details in the person and everything. And when you see people with stereotypes, you just see, you don't see the person as they are, but you see them as a, you know, as a group of person. Oh, it's all those people are like that. And we're like, okay, there is something about low resolution versus high resolution. And like, okay, maybe we can play with pixel, you know? And that's how we came up with that idea of like, if you're very pixelated, it means we're projecting things on you. You're not really who you are. You're just like a generalization. And when you go to higher resolution, it's exactly who you are. I mean, we see you. I mean that okay, all of that is not very scientific, but scientific, but you know what I
Yeah.
mean.
Absolutely. I love it.
And that's how we came up with that metaphor. So we combine those like generated characters with that idea of like pixelization, and we tried, and then I think the main exercise after that is like, how do we explain that metaphor? Because that metaphor, it makes sense when I explain it, but if I just show it like that, it doesn't, at first it doesn't really make sense. So we made a lot of iteration for the very first sequence of the video, where we try to be extremely, we rewrote the script like 10 times to be extremely obvious about, yes, low resolution means stereotype, high resolution means we remove stereotypes. So we added a lot of like, yeah, we tried to be as obvious as we could to explain that. The very first thing you see in the video is that metaphor explained. So we're able to reuse it a few times throughout the video. So that's the thing. So we start with like, okay, we have those character, what character? We have that metaphor. And then we're able to go inside the research and explain the research. I think that's the first thing I learned at MIT when I was like trying to explain the research. Like first you have to explain why that research exists because people don't care about research about that, you know. But if you explain the context in which like, okay, stereotypes are interesting. I mean, it's an interesting, especially because, you know, it really shapes the way we see the world. We understand the world. We understand each other. And then you get to the question, so okay, how do we remove that? How do we overcome those? So I think starting with that question, I think is really central. And then once you get people's understanding of like why should I pay attention for 2 minutes in my life? You know, when they agree on that, then you can move on to like the research and the hard part, which is like, okay, so there is a maze, there is two people, it gets more complicated. But before that, you need to be able to get that, and also to get that from like visually something satisfying visually, you know, that's quite important. Working on a few videos right now, and usually the first sequence and the last sequence, you know, what people see when they arrive on the video and what they see when they leave the video, hopefully, we want those to be like satisfying. We want those to be visually like nice, beautiful. I wrote about that, and that's something I really care about. Maybe we can link also that to art as well, but
Yeah.
beauty is such a powerful tool. Like it's totally undervalued tool. Making things beautiful is such a powerful way to get people attention, to get people to care about things, to get people to relate to things, and to get people to share things. Like beauty is so fundamental, and it's as a designer, we're like, oh no, don't talk about beauty. It's not, it's subjective, whatever. People don't care about that. Talk about like, the way people use things. True, it's important, but beauty is also, especially when you're talking about communication and sharing things and trying to get people to care about things, beauty is super important. So we're trying to get the first sequence, the last sequence of any videos to be as beautiful as we can and as like interesting.
Yeah, is there like in the process of actually working with the researchers and it is like doing all of the collaboration kind of behind the scenes, the brainstorming, all of that. Are there things you've noticed, like particular components of that I don't know, that really seems to help like bring out new ideas out of the researchers or to change perspectives or just like things what you like maybe what's your favorite part of that
Interesting.
collaboration process that you think really makes or breaks, I guess.
Yeah, I mean the difficulty to answer the question, it's like design work in general. It really depends on the people you have with you, and it depends on the clients. It's true for any creative work with a client, I would say. It's like some clients are going to be very challenging, and some others are going to be not challenging at all, which is also a problem. And some are going to be the perfect mix of just a little bit of challenge and be like, okay, that metaphor doesn't work. Here we need to change the script. But you're like, okay, yeah, exactly. That's what they say makes a lot of sense. That's perfect. That's what we need, and it's good. Sometimes it's going to be a lot of back and forth, and you're not really sure why there is all that back and forth, and so I don't think you could say I mean, not yeah. Every researcher, every collaboration is going to be different. But I think we're learning from all of them. First, honestly, once again, because we don't know anything. I don't know anything about neuroscience. So I'm learning so much. And I totally understand, like, sometimes we propose ideas and they're like, it doesn't make any sense with our research. I'm like, okay, no problem. It doesn't make any sense. And we move on to another way, another metaphor, another way of like framing things or another way of like telling that story. And that's fine. And that process of learning also is really, really fascinating. One thing we didn't talk about, and I think it's also interesting, uh, not that I want to go back to myself, but the fact that I am not, I spent some time, yes, at MIT and everything, but I'm not coming from academia. And I feel like a lot of people in science communication are coming from academia. I respect that highly. Most of my friends now either came out of like really cool school and everything, or are still working in academia today. But I am not. And I think once again, bring that naivety, bring that
Yeah.
external look, bring that idea of like being able to put myself in the head of like, I don't know, someone else that is not coming or that is not a scientist. I think it brings value to it. And I think it's great that science communication is full of people that did science and they were like, okay, maybe they're more interested in like communicating science rather than, doing research. Amazing, that's great. But I think science communication needs also people that are not coming from academia and are looking at
Yeah.
academia from an external point of view. And I see it as a strength, and I think we need more of those, and especially people with that creative vision.
I absolutely agree. I think the more I'm more and more convinced that like better science communication happens, like the more people you bring from
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
outside of the typical areas of expertise, from artists who've never done anything with science to like my own kind of soapbox right now is I mean, I've been learning sign language ASL because we have a
Okay,
deaf researcher at the center I work with, and just and exploring a little bit of that community, realizing there's like a whole culture of like obviously visual science communication because the entire language is visual. Like, how would educators teach science? Well, it's all
that's super
visual and
interesting.
like representing science in 3D with your hands to
There is so
educate.
much to learn from that.
And
That's
they've
super
been doing
interesting.
this, far longer than we've been
Yeah,
creating videos online about science. And like,
that is so interesting.
there's so much to learn from how
Yeah,
deaf individuals have like come up with three-dimensional explanations of science in sign language
that is so interesting.
that like the two worlds don't often mix, well, because of many reasons, accessibility
That
reasons
would
and all
make a
that.
great video.
Yeah, I know.
It's such a visual, with the hands and everything, it's such a visual thing.
Yeah, and it's amazing when you start learning sign language and like
Yeah,
they have so many like expert, I mean they are expert storytellers because
yeah,
they have to think in
yeah.
it, think
For
visually
sure,
and
for
how to
sure, for sure,
represent things
for
in
sure.
space that we might
True.
just think of in words, right? So just things like that, like
Yeah, 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 yeah.
bringing a deaf designer onto your team, like just people from total different
I
walks
totally
of
agree.
life.
I totally
I think
agree.
it improves it so much. And I think it's really interesting what you said about like naivety. I think some of that to me also is just like being willing to be naive. Like
Yeah.
I enjoy it. I get to go in. This is great. I always say like I get
Mm.
to go into the place where we work and just ask like the dumbest questions. It's
Exactly,
great because
exactly,
then I
exactly.
don't have to be anxious about sounding silly. I could just like
Mm.
be that's like my
Mm.
role and be like,
Exactly. And it's so nice. It's so nice to be that. And then because we also by being naive, I truly learn things. And I'm happy
yeah.
to I don't have to pretend I know things. I just like you to be like asking this the most basic question, you're like, oh yeah, it makes sense. And you're learning things, and I think it's great to be paid to be naive is great.